The Duke of Ashford's coat settled over her torn dress like a shroud of mercy she had never earned, and when he turned to face the 100 aristocrats staring at her exposed shame, his voice did not shake. "If any of you speak her name without reverence, you will answer to me, not as your peer, but as the man who would burn every bridge in England to stand where she cannot." Miss Eleanor Hartley, lady's maid turned object of scandal, stood trembling behind the broad shoulders of the man whose household she had just destroyed, watching him choose ruin over respectability, and she understood with terrifying clarity that she had not merely witnessed kindness, she had witnessed love announcing itself to a world that would never forgive them for it. Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The Countess of Redmond had orchestrated the exposure with surgical precision. She had waited until the midsummer ball reached its crescendo, that golden hour when champagne loosened tongues and the dancing made everyone believe in magic, before she led the Duke's youngest brother, Lord Peter Ashford, through the eastern corridor toward the conservatory, where Eleanor had been changing the arrangements at the Duke's specific request. Peter, 22 and drunk on both wine and the Countess's poisoned encouragements, had stumbled into the glass-walled room, startled Eleanor from her ladder, and sent her sprawling into a fountain that destroyed the bodice of her dress and left her gasping amid floating roses and her own humiliation. The Countess, of course, had ensured that half the ballroom followed to witness the scene.
"How clumsy," the Countess purred, her voice carrying like silk over sharpened steel, though perhaps not entirely surprising. The Duke has been unusually attentive to his household staff lately. Wonders what services merit such personal supervision. Eleanor had tried to cover herself with her hands, water streaming from her dark hair, the thin fabric of her undergarments clinging transparently. She had expected dismissal. She had expected shame. She had expected the Duke, when he arrived, drawn by the commotion, to look away, to let his housekeeper remove her, to pretend she had never existed. She had not expected him to strip off his evening coat without hesitation, to stride through the crowd of tittering nobles like they were mist, to wrap her in wool that still held his warmth and his scent of bergamot and old books. And she had certainly not expected him to turn his back on her, leaving himself vulnerable, protecting her with his body, and deliver a declaration that would haunt every drawing room in London before sunrise. The ballroom had fallen silent. The Duke of Ashford, Marcus Ashford, Ice Duke to those who whispered, the man who had rebuilt his family's fortune through ruthless intelligence and colder rejection of every marriage-minded mother in England, stood with water from the fountain darkening his shirt sleeves, his gray eyes moving across the assembly with the precision of a surgeon selecting where to cut. "My brother is drunk," he said, his voice perfectly level, "and the Countess is malicious. These are conditions that explain much, but excuse nothing. Miss Hartley came to Ashford House 3 years ago with references that would shame most of your governesses. She has managed my household with more grace than most of you manage your dinner conversations. And if you are waiting for me to apologize for valuing competence over pedigree, you will wait until England sinks into the sea."
"Your Grace," the Countess began, honey-voiced, "no one questions Miss Hartley's competence, but surely you see how this appears.
I see exactly how it appears, Marcus interrupted, and something in his tone made the Countess step back. It appears that you orchestrated a humiliation to satisfy a grudge. It appears that my brother, whom I will deal with privately, was your willing instrument. And it appears that every person in this room would rather believe the worst of a woman who cannot defend herself than consider that I might simply recognize excellence when I see it. Excellence, Lord Pemberton drawled from near the champagne fountain. Is that what we're calling it now? Come, Ashford, you're not the first nobleman to develop an appreciation for a servant. Just pay her off quietly like the rest of us. Marcus moved so quickly that Eleanor barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next his hand was fisted in Pemberton's cravat, hauling the shorter man onto his toes. "Say one more word," Marcus said softly, "and I will explain to your wife exactly why her lady's maid left your household in tears last autumn. I have always kept certain information private out of a mistaken belief in gentlemanly discretion. But if you force me to choose between that discretion and defending someone who matters to me, I promise you, you will not enjoy my choice." He released Pemberton, who stumbled back red-faced and silent. Marcus surveyed the room once more. "Miss Hartley will continue in my employment. Anyone who finds this unacceptable is welcome to decline future invitations to Ashford House. I suspect we will both find the reduced guest lists refreshing." Then he turned, and for the first time since he had covered her with his coat, he looked directly at Eleanor. His eyes, gray as winter fog, usually so unreadable, held something that made her forget the 100 people watching, forget the water still dripping from her hair, forget everything except the sudden certainty that her life had just divided into before and after this moment. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then we're leaving. Keep the coat." He offered his arm, propriety be damned, and Eleanor, who had learned in 3 years of service never to presume, never to reach beyond her station, never to forget the unbridgeable gulf between the Duke of Ashford and a merchant's daughter who had been grateful to find employment after her father's bankruptcy, took it. They walked through the silent ballroom together, his hand covering hers on his sleeve, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the marble floor, his coat hanging to her knees. The crowd parted like water before them. Eleanor kept her eyes forward, her chin high, channeling every ounce of dignity she could muster while her heart hammered against her ribs, and her mind screamed that this was impossible, that dukes did not do this, that tomorrow she would wake to find it had been a fever dream born of shock and fountain water. But his hand stayed warm over hers, steady and sure, and when they reached the entrance hall, he did not let go. "Your Grace," she managed, her voice rough, "you should not have— People will say—" "People will say exactly what they were already saying," he interrupted, guiding her toward the private family wing rather than the servants' quarters. "The Countess has been spreading rumors for months. Tonight, she simply forced the matter into the open." Eleanor stopped walking, forcing him to stop as well. "Rumors? What rumors?" He looked at her, and she saw something flicker behind his careful control. Uncertainty, perhaps, or fear. "That I have feelings for you. That I have been inappropriate. That my attention to household matters has less to do with management and more to do with engineering opportunities to see you." The corridor spun slightly. And are they true? The words escaped before she could stop them, and she immediately wanted to snatch them back, to return to the safety of silence and her proper place below stairs. Marcus Ashford, the Ice Duke, the man who had rebuilt a crumbling legacy through sheer force of will and refused to let emotion guide any decision, closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked like a man stepping off a cliff. "Yes," he said simply.
every word. Eleanor's knees would have given out if he hadn't been holding her arm. "You cannot. I am a servant. You are a duke. This is—" "Impossible?" he supplied. "Yes. Improper? Undoubtedly. Do I care?" He stepped closer, and she could see the rapid pulse at his throat, the only sign that he was not as calm as his voice suggested. "Eleanor, I have spent 3 years watching you transform my house from a mausoleum into a home. I have listened to you correct my steward's arithmetic with more patience than I possess. I have seen you comfort my sister through her grief, manage my brother's chaos, and somehow make my impossible standards seem not only achievable but worth achieving. And I have tried, God knows I have tried, to convince myself that what I feel is admiration, or respect, or simple appreciation for competence." "And what do you feel?" she whispered. "Everything," he said, and the word cracked with desperation. "Everything that I should not feel. Everything that makes me lie awake at night inventing reasons to call you to my study. Everything that made me memorize which days you visit the lending library so I might accidentally encounter you. Everything that tonight turned me into the kind of fool who burns his reputation to ashes rather than watch you face that crowd alone." Eleanor was crying, she realized. Silent tears mixing with the fountain water still drying on her cheeks. "They will destroy you for this. The Countess has the ear of half the ton. Your business associates, your political connections, can all rot," he said fiercely. "I spent 5 years rebuilding this family's name. I played their games, made their alliances, married off my sister to secure our position. I have been so careful, Eleanor, so endlessly, suffocatingly careful. And for what? So I could stand in rooms full of people who value nothing but title and money, while the only person whose opinion I actually value changes flower arrangements in my conservatory? That is not a life," Eleanor said, understanding flooding through her. "You cannot give up everything for you?" He cupped her face in his hands, his palms warm against her cold skin. "Watch me." She should have pulled away. She should have remembered propriety, station, the 1,000 rules that governed their world. Instead, she leaned into his touch and let herself want what she had forbidden herself to even imagine. "Your Grace, Marcus," he corrected. "If we are to be ruined together, I think you might use my name." "Marcus," she repeated, tasting the intimacy of it. "What happens now?" He smiled, and it transformed his face from coldly handsome to something approaching beautiful. Now I take you to the Blue Guest Suite because I am not sending you back to the servants' quarters tonight. Now I send for my sister because she will happily murder anyone who tries to disturb you. Now I go back downstairs and endure the rest of this disaster with whatever grace I can muster. And tomorrow, she echoed, tomorrow I begin courting you properly, with all the scandal that implies. Unless, doubt crossed his face, unless you do not want this. I have been arrogant tonight, presumptuous. If your feelings do not match mine, I will still protect you, still ensure your reputation is—" Eleanor kissed him. It was brief, chaste, utterly improper, and the single bravest thing she had ever done. When she pulled back, his eyes had gone wide with shock. "I have loved you since the day you fired your gamekeeper for setting traps that hurt the village children," she said. "I have loved you through every impossible standard, every glacial expression, every moment you pretended not to notice when I left books I thought you might enjoy in your study. I thought I was alone in it. I thought I was mad, and I never, ever allowed myself to hope." He kissed her back, deeper, his hands sliding into her wet hair. and Eleanor forgot about propriety entirely. She forgot about the ballroom full of witnesses, forgot society's rules, forgot everything except the desperate tenderness in the way he held her, as if she were something precious he had been afraid to touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eleanor laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "We are ruined." "Spectacularly," he agreed, but he was smiling. "Shall we be ruined together?" "Yes," she said, and kissed him again. The blue guest suite was every bit as elegant as Eleanor had maintained it to be, though she had never imagined occupying it herself. Marcus left her at the door with a promise to send his sister immediately, and a look that made her pulse race, before he forced himself to return to the ballroom and face the consequences of his choices. Lady Catherine Ashford, the Duke's younger sister, arrived within minutes, followed by a flurry of maids carrying hot water, towels, and several dresses that Catherine had clearly grabbed at random from her own wardrobe. "Out," Catherine commanded the maids once the water was poured. When they had gone, she turned to Eleanor with eyes that held both shrewdness and warmth. "Well, my brother has finally done something interesting." Eleanor, who had been Catherine's confidant through the young woman's grief after her husband's death 2 years prior, managed a weak laugh. "I am so sorry, my lady. I never meant—" "Oh, hush," Catherine interrupted, beginning to help Eleanor out of the ruined dress. "Marcus has been circling you like a lovesick puppy for months. It was excruciating to watch. At least now it is out in the open and we can all stop pretending." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Do you love him? Truly? Because he will face the fires of hell for you, but I will not watch him do it for someone who does not feel the same." "I love him," Eleanor said, and the admission felt like breathing after holding her breath for years. "I know I shouldn't. I know it is impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Catherine said firmly. "Difficult, yes. Scandalous? Absolutely. But Marcus rebuilt this family once already. If anyone can weather a scandal, it is my brother. The question is whether you are willing to stand in the storm with him." Eleanor thought of Marcus facing the ballroom alone, of his hand steady over hers, of the way he had said everything, like it was both confession and prayer. "Yes," she said, "I am." Catherine smiled. "Good, because I have always found you far better company than any of those vapid society ladies, and I would hate to lose you to propriety. Now, let us get you cleaned up and into something that does not smell of fountain water. Marcus will return soon, and he will want to see that you are well. Also, we need to plan." "Plan?" Eleanor asked, sinking into the copper bath while Catherine efficiently pinned up her wet hair. "Of course. The Countess of Redmond is a viper, but she is not without vulnerabilities. And Lord Pemberton's threat about his wife, Marcus knows things about half the ton that would make your hair curl. We are not without weapons, Eleanor. We simply need to deploy them." "I do not want Marcus to destroy his connections," Eleanor protested. "He does not need to destroy them," Catherine said, her eyes glinting. "He merely needs to remind certain people that discretion is a courtesy extended to those who extend it to others. Once a few well-chosen individuals understand that the alternative to accepting you is having their own indiscretions illuminated, society will adapt remarkably quickly." "That seems ruthless." "My brother is many things, Eleanor, but ruthless is at the top of the list when protecting what he loves. And now he loves you." Catherine handed her soap. "Besides, the Countess overplayed her hand tonight. Public humiliation of a servant reflects poorly on her, not you. Several of the older ladies were already whispering their disapproval before Marcus even intervened. You have allies you do not know about." Eleanor washed mechanically, her mind spinning. What if it is not enough? What if the scandal is too great? Then Marcus will weather it, and you will weather it together. Catherine knelt beside the tub, her expression earnest.
"Eleanor, my brother has been cold as winter since our father died and left us in ruins. He was 23, drowning in debt, responsible for me and Peter and an estate that was bleeding money. He turned himself into ice to survive it. And then you arrived, and slowly, so slowly, he probably did not notice, he thawed. You made him laugh. You made him human again. Do you really think he will give that up for society's approval?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I never knew. He never showed." "Of course he did not show. He is Marcus. He would rather die than appear vulnerable." Catherine smiled. "But I saw it. The way he found excuses to check on household matters he had ignored for years. The way his mood improved after you visited his study with the accounts. The way he started keeping flowers in his private rooms after you once mentioned you liked them. He has been courting you, Eleanor." "He simply did it so carefully that even you did not notice." Eleanor remembered 100 small moments. Marcus asking her opinion on the new library arrangement, then implementing every suggestion. Marcus defending her decisions to his steward. Marcus always seeming to have time for conversation when she brought him the household reports. Marcus at the lending library, pretending surprise at encountering her 3 Tuesdays in a row. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, I am an idiot." Catherine laughed. "You were cautious. It is the sensible response when a duke appears interested in his housekeeper. But Eleanor, you can stop being cautious now. My brother just announced his intentions to all of London society. Caution is no longer an option." A knock at the door made them both turn. Marcus' voice carried through. "Catherine? Is Eleanor? May I?" "Give us 5 minutes," Catherine called back, then grinned at Eleanor. "Let us make you presentable for your suitor." 5 minutes later, Eleanor stood in one of Catherine's simpler dresses, deep blue silk that somehow fit reasonably well despite their different heights, with her hair dried and braided over one shoulder. Catherine opened the door to reveal Marcus, still in his water-stained shirt and waistcoat, looking exhausted and anxious. His eyes found Eleanor, and his entire body relaxed. "I will be in my rooms," Catherine announced, squeezing Eleanor's hand once before sweeping past her brother. "Do try to maintain some propriety, Marcus. The poor girl has had enough scandal for one evening." Then she was gone, and Eleanor was alone with the Duke of Ashford in a guest suite at midnight, completely unchaperoned, and she found she did not care at all about propriety anymore. "How bad was it?" she asked. Marcus closed the door, but stayed near it, as if afraid to come closer. The Countess left in high dudgeon. About half the assembly followed her. The other half stayed, which is actually promising. It suggests they are at least willing to see how this plays out. Pemberton issued a formal apology, which I accepted. And Peter is currently locked in his rooms, writing what I suspect will be a lengthy letter of apology to you. He does not need to apologize. He was drunk and manipulated. "He needs to apologize," Marcus said firmly. "Drunk is not an excuse for carelessness that harms someone under our protection. He is 22, not 12. He is old enough to face consequences." Eleanor studied him. This man who had just upended his life for her, who still stood carefully distant as if afraid she might regret what had happened between them. "Marcus, come here." He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I was so afraid," he murmured. "When I saw you in that fountain, saw the way they were looking at you, I have never been so angry in my life." "You hit it well," she said, her hands coming up to grip his waistcoat. "You were terrifyingly calm." "I have had practice hiding what I feel. 5 years of practice, to be exact." He pulled back enough to look at her. "But I am tired of hiding, Eleanor.
I am tired of pretending you are merely an excellent housekeeper when you are the only person in this entire city whose presence I actively seek. I am tired of lying awake at night telling myself this is impossible when my heart has already decided it is inevitable. "What are you saying?" she asked, though she thought she knew, though hope was building in her chest like sunrise. "I am saying that I am going to court you," he said. "Publicly, properly, with every scandal that entails. I am saying that I do not care what society thinks, because I have spent 5 years caring and it has made me miserable. I am saying that you are the best decision I have ever made, even if I make it in the most disastrous way possible. Your reputation will recover or it will not. Either way, I will have you." He cupped her face. "Unless you do not want this. Eleanor, I have been high-handed tonight, presumptuous. If you want to leave Ashford House, I will help you establish yourself elsewhere. I will provide references, funds, whatever you need. You are not trapped by my decisions." Eleanor laughed, though it came out more like a sob. "I have nowhere else I would rather be trapped." "Then you will stay?" "I will stay." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent. "Tomorrow I speak with my solicitor. I want to understand exactly what we are facing, legally, socially. I will not have you ambushed by rules I should have anticipated." "Tomorrow I speak with your housekeeper," Eleanor said. "If I am to be courted by the master of the house, I cannot continue managing his household. It would be inappropriate." Marcus winced. "You are right, of course. But Ashford House will fall apart without you." "It will not," she assured him. "Mrs. Hendricks is perfectly capable. I have been training her for months." "I had thought—" She trailed off, uncertain if she should continue. "You had thought what?" "I had thought I might need to leave," she admitted quietly. "That my feelings for you were growing too obvious, too dangerous. I have been preparing for my own departure." His arms tightened around her. "Promise me you will not leave, not without talking to me first." "I promise." They stood holding each other as the candles burned lower, the night deepening around them. Eventually, Marcus forced himself to step back, though he kept hold of her hands. "I should let you rest. Tonight has been revelatory," Eleanor supplied. "Terrifying. Wonderful." "Yes." He smiled, and again she was struck by how it transformed him. "Sleep, Eleanor. Tomorrow we face the consequences together, but tonight you are safe." After he left, Eleanor lay in the unfamiliar luxury of the guest bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 6 hours ago, she had been a housekeeper arranging flowers. Now, she was the subject of the biggest scandal to hit London society in years, and the Duke of Ashford, Marcus, had declared his intention to court her despite the ruin it would bring. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly peaceful, as if something that had been twisted inside her for 3 years had finally straightened out, as if she could finally breathe properly. She fell asleep with his coat, still smelling of bergamot and old books, draped over her shoulders like a talisman against the storm she knew was coming. The morning brought reality in the form of scandal sheets. Catherine burst into Eleanor's room at 8 o'clock, waving a newspaper like a weapon. "Well, we are famous." Eleanor sat up, accepting the paper with dread. The headline screamed, "Duke of Ashford declares love for servant at midsummer ball. Countess of Redmond exposed as orchestrator of humiliation." "That is not entirely inaccurate," Eleanor said weakly, scanning the article. It was surprisingly sympathetic, painting Marcus as a romantic figure defending the innocent and the Countess as a jealous schemer. Who wrote this? "Lord Hartley," Catherine said with satisfaction. "He is a romantic at heart and also despises the Countess for rejecting his son last season. He owns 3 of the major scandal sheets and apparently decided to control the narrative before the Countess could. So we have allies." "We have some allies.
We also have enemies. Catherine tossed down 3 more papers, these with far less flattering headlines. But Marcus expected this. He is downstairs terrifying journalists and writing letters to every business associate who might be tempted to distance themselves. He is also, she hesitated, what? Proposing to you, soon. He wanted me to ask if you would find it presumptuous. Eleanor's heart stopped. What? Marcus believes that an engagement will reduce the scandal, turn it from illicit affair to romantic courtship. He is not wrong. A duke may court whomever he wishes. It is his business who he marries. But Eleanor, you must understand what you would be accepting. Marriage to my brother means standing in the storm permanently. It means every social event will include whispers, every introduction will carry the unspoken question of how a housekeeper became a duchess. Are you prepared for that? Eleanor thought about spending her life returning to empty rooms after each social humiliation, or spending it returning to Marcus. She thought about silence and safety, or love and scandal. Yes, she said, I am prepared. Catherine's smile was fierce. Good, because you are exactly what this family needs, someone with the spine to stand beside Marcus when he is being an arrogant fool, and the heart to see why he does it anyway. Now get dressed. We are going out. Going out? Where? To the modist, the milliner, and several shops that Marcus has arranged to open early specifically for us. If you are to be a duchess, you need a duchess wardrobe. At Eleanor's expression, Catherine laughed. Oh, stop looking terrified. It will be fun. Besides, being seen spending Marcus money on you is a statement. It tells society he is serious. 3 hours later, Eleanor stood in the finest modist's shop in London, surrounded by bolts of silk and muslin, while Madame Dubois, who had dressed half the peerage, measured her with brisk efficiency and an approving eye. The Duke has excellent taste, Madame Dubois declared in her crisp French accent. Miss Hartley has the figure and bearing for truly elegant gowns. None of this simpering pastel nonsense. We will do jewel tones, clean lines. She will be memorable. She will be magnificent, Catherine corrected, fingering a bolt of deep emerald silk. And every woman in London will be trying to copy her within the month. Naturally, Madame Dubois agreed. Now, for the engagement ball, yes, Lady Catherine, I know there will be one. His Grace already sent word. I am thinking midnight blue with silver embroidery. Classical, elegant, utterly unsuitable for a merely pretty girl, but perfect for Miss Hartley. Eleanor, who had never had more than 2 dresses at once in her adult life, felt dizzy. This is too much. This is strategy, Catherine interrupted. Marcus is not just buying you dresses, Eleanor. He is sending a message. Every shopkeeper we visit, every merchant who sees him spending lavishly on you, carries that message back to their other clients. The Duke of Ashford does not hide his attachments in shame. He celebrates them. By the time they returned to Ashford House, Eleanor's head was spinning with decisions about fabric and trimmings, and she was exhausted. But Marcus met them in the entrance hall, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. Was Catherine merciless? He asked. Catherine was perfect, Eleanor replied, also slightly terrifying. That is her natural state. He offered his arm. Walk with me. They strolled through the garden while Catherine tactfully disappeared inside. The summer afternoon was warm, and the roses Eleanor had planted 2 years ago were in full bloom. Marcus led them to a secluded bench beneath a pergola heavy with wisteria. I have been thinking, he said once they were seated, his hand finding hers, about timing and strategy and what will cause the least damage while still achieving what I want, which is you, as my wife, legally and publicly. He turned to face her. Eleanor, I know this is fast. I know you probably imagined, if you imagined this at all, that there would be a proper courtship, time to adjust, a gradual introduction to society. But I do not think we have that luxury. The scandal is happening now, and a betrothal would give you protection that my simple declaration cannot. You want to marry me." She said it as a statement, still trying to make it feel real. "I want to marry you more than I have wanted anything in my life," he said. "But I need you to understand what you would be accepting. My family is secure financially, but socially we are precarious. My father nearly destroyed us with his gambling and his cruelty. I have spent 5 years rebuilding, and this scandal threatens that work. Some of my business associates will distance themselves. Some social connections will sever. There will be years, perhaps many years, where we are not welcome in certain houses." "But," Eleanor prompted, because she could hear the qualifier in his voice. "But I do not care," he said fiercely. "Let them close their doors. We will build our own world, Eleanor. We will fill this house with people who matter, artists, scholars, reformers, anyone with an interesting mind and a good heart, regardless of their pedigree. We will be happy. Damn what society thinks." Eleanor studied his face, the sharp planes softened now by hope and fear in equal measure. "You are asking me to be your partner in rebuilding your world. I am asking you to be my partner in building a better world than the one we were given," he corrected. "A world where competence matters more than birth, where love outweighs propriety, where we do not have to choose between happiness and honor because we redefine honor as keeping faith with the people who matter." "That is quite a revolution," Eleanor said, though her heart was singing. "I am told revolutions require courage," Marcus said, and there was vulnerability in his voice that made her ache. "Eleanor, I am asking you to be brave with me, to face the whispers and the cuts and the closed doors, and to do it holding my hand. I am asking you to let me love you publicly, proudly, permanently. I am asking you to marry me." He produced a ring from his pocket, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, antique but clearly valuable. "This was my grandmother's. She was a merchant's daughter who married my grandfather for love, not title. My father tried to sell it during his worst debts, but I hid it. I have been keeping it safe, waiting without knowing I was waiting. And now—" "Yes," Eleanor interrupted, because suddenly she could not wait another second. "Yes, Marcus, yes to all of it. The scandal, the revolution, the partnership. Yes to rebuilding the world. Yes to you." His hands shook slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he was kissing her, deep and desperate, and Eleanor was kissing him back, pouring 3 years of denied longing into the contact. When they finally broke apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "I will make you happy," he promised, "whatever it costs, whatever I have to face. I will make you happy." "You already do," she said simply. "Everything else is just details." But the details, as they quickly discovered, were complicated. The following weeks brought a storm of social consequences. Half of society, led by the Countess of Redmond and her allies, declared the engagement scandalous and refused to acknowledge Eleanor. Invitations to several prestigious events were quietly withdrawn. Marcus's club membership was questioned, though not revoked. 2 of his business partners sent regretful letters about dissolving their arrangements. But the other half of society, led by Lord Hartley and several progressive-minded nobles, declared the romance a triumph of love over convention and made pointed efforts to welcome Eleanor. Lady Hartley called on her personally, bringing her daughter as a statement of support. Several influential political wives invited them both to intimate dinner parties where Eleanor was treated with perfect courtesy. "You see,"
Catherine said one afternoon as they reviewed the latest batch of calling cards. Society is not monolithic. There are always fractures, always people ready to embrace change if given a leader brave enough to embody it. Marcus is that leader, and you, Eleanor, are the change. Eleanor, who had spent 3 weeks learning to be a duchess-in-waiting while still feeling like an imposter, made a face. I feel more like a scandal than a change. All change begins as scandal, Catherine said philosophically. The question is whether the scandal outlasts the shock. In your case, I think not. You are too competent to dismiss. Marcus is too powerful to ignore. And the Countess overplayed her hand so badly that even her allies are quietly distancing themselves. Indeed, the Countess's fortunes had taken a decided turn for the worse. Lord Hartley's papers had published a series of articles detailing her history of social cruelty, and several women had come forward with stories of similar orchestrated humiliations. Public opinion was turning against her. "Does it make me petty that I find that satisfying?" Eleanor asked. "It makes you human," Catherine assured her. "She tried to destroy you out of jealousy. Yes, Eleanor, jealousy. The woman has been pursuing Marcus for years, and instead she destroyed herself. That is justice, not pettiness." The engagement ball took place exactly 1 month after the midsummer disaster. Marcus had insisted on hosting it at Ashford House, and Eleanor had agreed despite her nervousness. They had sent invitations to everyone, allies and enemies alike, curious to see who would attend. The answer surprised them all. 3/4 of those invited came, including several who had initially sided with the Countess. The remaining quarter sent polite regrets that were at least civil. Eleanor stood at the top of the grand staircase in her midnight blue gown, Marcus beside her in formal black, and tried to steady her breathing. Below, the ballroom glittered with hundreds of candles and the cream of London society. In moments, they would descend, and she would be formally introduced as the Duke of Ashford's intended. "Terrified?" Marcus murmured. "Absolutely," she admitted. "Good. It means you understand what this means." He took her hand. "But, Eleanor, you are not alone in this. Whatever happens down there, we face it together." They descended into the ballroom side by side, and as the master of ceremonies announced them, every eye turned to watch. Eleanor felt the weight of those stares, curious, admiring, envious, disapproving, and lifted her chin. She had survived worse than aristocratic judgment. She had survived poverty, bankruptcy, the death of her parents, and the years of clawing her way to respectability one household position at a time. She was not going to falter now. Marcus led her directly to the dance floor for the opening waltz. As they moved through the familiar steps, he smiled down at her. "You are magnificent. Do you know that? Every person in this room is watching you and wondering how a housekeeper learned to carry herself like a queen." "I had a good teacher," she said, referencing the dancing lessons Catherine had been drilling into her for weeks. "Also, I am pretending that I am simply managing a particularly elaborate dinner party. It helps." He laughed, and the sound made several nearby dancers turn to stare. The Ice Duke, laughing openly with his unsuitable fiancée, clearly besotted. "Let them stare," he said, spinning her through a turn. "Let them wonder. Let them see what happens when someone stops caring about their approval." The dance ended to polite applause, and then they were surrounded by well-wishers, genuine and otherwise. Eleanor found herself curtsying to duchess after duchess, accepting congratulations while trying to remember which titles went with which faces, all while maintaining the perfect composure Marcus had spent hours coaching her on. "Miss Hartley," Lady Pemberton said, appearing at her elbow with a sympathetic smile. "I wanted to apologize for my husband's behavior at the midsummer ball. He was unconscionably rude.
and I wanted you to know that not everyone shares his perspective." "Thank you," Eleanor said, surprised by the woman's directness. "That is very kind." "It is honest," Lady Pemberton corrected, "and honesty seems in short supply these days. I hope we might become better acquainted. I suspect you and I have more in common than one might assume." She glanced meaningfully at her husband across the room, and Eleanor understood. Lady Pemberton knew exactly what Marcus had threatened to reveal, and she was grateful for his discretion. More allies, Eleanor thought, built on unexpected foundations. The evening progressed successfully. There were a few deliberate snubs, ladies who turned away without acknowledging introductions, gentlemen who found pressing business elsewhere when Marcus tried to include them in conversation, but they were the minority. Most of society, Eleanor realized, was simply curious. They wanted to see if this scandalous engagement would actually result in marriage, wanted to watch the drama unfold, and were willing to be polite in the meantime. Near midnight, Marcus drew her out onto the terrace for a moment's respite. The summer night was warm and clear, and from here they could hear the music and laughter, but were separated from the crowd. "You are doing beautifully," he said, pulling her close. "I feel like an actress in a play," she admitted, saying the right lines, wearing the right costume, but not quite real. "It will be real," he promised. "Give it time. This world," he gestured back toward the ballroom, "is not natural to you yet, but it will be. And then you will transform it, just as you transformed my house, my life." "I did not transform your life," she protested. "You chose." "You," he interrupted. "I chose you. But Eleanor, you made that choice possible. You showed me what it meant to value substance over form, competence over pedigree, genuine connection over social advantage. Everything I am doing, the scandal, the struggle, the revolution, it is because you taught me that there was another way to live." She kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting champagne and possibility. When she pulled back, she smiled. "Then I suppose we should finish what we started." "The ball or the revolution?" "Both." They returned to the ballroom hand in hand, and Eleanor, former housekeeper, current scandal, future Duchess of Ashford, met every stair with her head high and Marcus's ring glinting on her finger. The wedding took place in early autumn, 3 months after the engagement. Marcus had wanted to wait longer, to give Eleanor more time to adjust to her new position, but she had refused. "I do not need more time to be certain," she told him, "and waiting only prolongs the speculation. Let us marry, Marcus, and turn scandal into history." They chose a smaller ceremony than the ton expected, only 200 guests instead of the 500 a duke's wedding typically demanded. But those 200 were carefully selected: allies, friends, family, and a few calculated invitations to influential people whose attendance would signal broader social acceptance. Eleanor walked down the aisle of St. George's Chapel on Catherine's arm, wearing a gown of ivory silk, so beautifully simple that Madame Dubois had declared it her masterpiece. She felt the eyes on her, still curious, still judging, but she also felt Marcus's gaze, steady and sure, and that was all that mattered. The vows were traditional, but when Marcus slipped the wedding band onto her finger beside her grandmother's sapphire, he bent close and whispered, "Everything. Remember?" "Everything," she whispered back, and meant it. The breakfast afterward was held at Ashford House, which Eleanor had spent weeks perfecting. She had tried to hand over control to the new housekeeper, but old habits died hard, and she had found herself directing flower arrangements at midnight the day before her wedding while Marcus dragged her back to bed with amused exasperation. As Duchess, Eleanor discovered, she had both more freedom and less than she had anticipated. More freedom to move in society, to host whom she wished, to champion causes she cared about. Less freedom to escape notice, to be invisible, to avoid the constant scrutiny that came with Marcus's title. But she adapted.
She was, after all, very good at assessing complex systems and finding ways to manage them. Society was simply another household to organize, another set of rules to master while quietly subverting them. Within a year, the scandal had faded to gossip, and gossip to history. The Duchess of Ashford, people said, was unconventional but undeniably effective. She hosted brilliant salons that mixed nobles with artists and reformers. She revolutionized household management at several major estates after other ladies observed her methods and requested her advice. She championed education for women and employment protections for servants, using her position to push for gradual reforms. And she loved the Duke of Ashford with a constancy that made even their skeptics grudgingly admit that perhaps, just perhaps, romantic love was a better foundation for marriage than social advantage. Marcus, for his part, found that the business partners who had abandoned him were quickly replaced by new allies who valued his judgment more than his conformity. His political influence grew rather than shrank, as progressive lords recognized him as someone willing to challenge convention and support them in doing the same. "We are winning," Catherine declared one afternoon, reviewing the latest round of invitations that had arrived. "Look, Lady Pemberton is hosting a women's education charity evening and specifically requested your attendance as guest of honor. The Hartleys want Marcus to speak at their political salon. We have been invited to the Prince Regent's summer party, which means we are officially acceptable again." "Were we ever truly unacceptable?" Eleanor asked, arranging flowers in the morning room. She still insisted on doing some tasks herself, unable to entirely relinquish the habits of years. "Briefly," Catherine said with satisfaction, "but you were so competent at being scandalous that society simply accepted you out of exhaustion." Eleanor laughed. "I will take that as a compliment. You should. Most scandalous figures flame out within months. You, dear sister, have staying power." 2 years after the midsummer ball, Eleanor stood in the nursery at Ashford House, holding her infant daughter and watching Marcus read to their energetic son. Little Thomas, nearly 18 months old, was far more interested in pulling his father's hair than listening to the story, but Marcus persevered with admirable patience. "Papa," Thomas demanded, tugging on Marcus's ear. "Down!" "In a moment," Marcus promised, finishing the page. "We must see if the knight rescues the princess." "No princess," Thomas announced. "Horses." "The knight has a horse," Eleanor interjected from her chair. "A very fine horse." Thomas considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Horses good." Marcus caught Eleanor's eye and grinned, the warm, unguarded expression he saved for private moments with his family. The Ice Duke had long since melted, at least within these walls. Little Julia, barely 3 months old, made a small sound in Eleanor's arms, and Marcus immediately set aside the book to check on his daughter. "Is she well? Does she need?" "She is perfect," Eleanor assured him, just stretching. "You worry too much." "I am a father," he said, carefully touching Julia's tiny hand. "Worrying is my primary occupation now." "I thought being Duke was your primary occupation." "That is merely how I fund the worrying." He settled beside Eleanor's chair, one hand resting on her shoulder, while Thomas climbed into his lap with the determination of a small conqueror. "Though I admit, being Duke has become considerably more enjoyable since I stopped caring whether I was popular." "You are popular," Eleanor corrected, "just with a different set of people than before." It was true. Marcus's political salon had become one of the most influential in London, drawing reformers, scholars, and progressive nobles who appreciated his willingness to discuss radical ideas. His business ventures had expanded into worker protections and education initiatives that were both profitable and genuinely improving people's lives. And their household, once a cold mausoleum of propriety, had transformed into something warm and vital. They hosted frequently, mixing social classes in ways that would have scandalized society 5 years ago, but now merely raised eyebrows. Eleanor's former colleagues from service were regular guests, as were Marcus's business associates, regardless of their origins. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked quietly. "The scandal, the struggle, the years of whispers?" Eleanor looked at him, her husband, her partner, her great love, and at their children, and at the life they had built together out of one moment of reckless courage. "Never," she said, "not for a single moment." "Good," he said, and kissed her, "because I have absolutely no regrets either." Thomas, trapped between them, made a disgusted sound. "No kissing," he declared. "Horses." They laughed, and Julia opened her eyes to observe her chaotic family with the serene patience of the very young. "Horses it is," Marcus agreed, settling his son more comfortably, "though perhaps after dinner." "Horses now," Thomas insisted, with the absolute certainty of a toddler who has made up his mind. "Our son, Marcus," informed Eleanor solemnly, "has your stubbornness." "My stubbornness?" Eleanor protested. "He is your heir. That stubbornness is pure Ashford." "Then he is doomed," Marcus said cheerfully. "Come, my stubborn family, let us go see the horses before Thomas stages a revolution." They walked together through Ashford House, Duke, Duchess, heir, and daughter, and if the servants smiled to see them, well, that was simply because the Ashfords had never been a conventional family. They had, after all, been born in scandal and raised in revolution. And they had never been happier.